regional planning. He's going to kind of give an overview of the concepts we've been working with. The town council's been working with him for at least 2 years that I know of, and more than that with regional planning, trying to have the input of the community onto the new area-wide plan and the general plan. Our main cause we've been going at is twofold. One, keep it rural, and two, consistency. Consistency between the land uses, consistency between that and the zoning, and with the community standards district. So there is no, or as little as possible, ambiguity in between those, so that we know what we've got, what it's going to be, how it's going to be the next 15, 20 years till they revise it again. Anyway, Carl's going to give a little presentation to start out, and then we'll open up the floor for questions. He will make himself available as much as we need to answer your individual questions about your individual properties or the overall concept. Okay?
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Carl.
Well, first I'd like to thank Mike and the rest of the town council for inviting me. I just thought it's been 2 years since I was last here. I know it's been 2 years since my wife was pregnant at that point, and my daughter just turned 2 last month. So I know it's been quite a while since we've been back here. There's been a few changes in the plan since we were last year, but in Acton, it's remained fairly stable. Most of the changes happen in the north side where there's the high desert corridor coming in, the northwest ones are the improvement projects coming in. So in Acton, it stayed pretty much the same. So we've just been having tweaks here and there based on our conversations with individual property owners and people like that. I'll give an overview with regards to what the project, what the purpose was, when we started it. So this all started in 2007. I got involved in this probably about 3 years ago, but we did start this way back in 2007. And the main reason for that was that we heard from the communities that people wanted to protect and preserve the rural character of that whole valley. So when we talk to people, they always say they came up here for a reason. They don't want it to become the next Santa Clarita Valley, the next Santa Fernando Valley. So that was the whole reason we wanted to sort of review and update the plan. And the plan is really old. It's 1986. It was adopted in 1986. It's about 30 years old, more or less now. So it was time for an update. So what we did was the existing plan actually has a blanket, either 1 per 1 acre density or 1 per 2 acre density. If you spread that across the whole Antelope Valley, that's your suburb, that's your Santa Clarita Valley, that's your San Fernando Valley. So we tried to be more nuanced in terms of the density that we were going to propose for town areas, for the preserved areas, and more of the rural areas up in the North Valley. In the town of Acton, it's actually when you look at the main town center, it's actually remained pretty much the same. The uses here, the land uses in the area here, it's remained 1 per 1 acre. Going outside, it's remained like 1 per 2 acres. So just to give you an overview of the land uses, RL1 is a density of 1 per 1 acre, and RL2 is a density of 1 per 2 acres. And RL5 is a density of 1 per 5 acre, and so on and so forth. So RL10, 1 per 10, RL20, 1 per 20. So if you look at the land uses, first of all, the first step was to make sure we don't zone out any existing land uses. So these would actually reflect pretty much the existing development, existing parcelization in Acton. So you would see here where there's been subdivision of 2 acre parcel, we kept it RL2. In areas where it seemed like it was going to develop in a more rural setting, more of a 5 acre parcel. I think we've heard people who wanted more of a large lot sizes. We went with RL5 in those areas here. The further away you get from the town, we went with lower densities. So we have RL10, RL20. These are we are reducing densities quite a bit. We have heard from people though, like living in these areas, that they would prefer to be RL5 or 1 per 5 acre, and that's still open for discussion. We definitely can take a look at that, and I've been telling those folks, send me your assessor's parcel numbers, I'll take a look at it, we'll do research. And we definitely can make changes to the plan. It's not set in stone at this point, although the way it goes closing pretty fast. I would say if you have questions, send me your APM's response, we'll take a look at that. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Is that Crown Valley Road?
Yes, Crown Valley is here.
Oh, that's Crown Valley Road.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, so the pink line is going over on the right is what? Is that the wash? No, in the right.
This one here? Oh no, that's the real way. The pink is stands for the P, or public or semi-public designation. So anything that's publicly owned, we have designated as P. So, we have
Oh, so that's the railway?
it's a railway. It's a right of way of, I think, the Metro Line. So that's that. So I think a lot of the confusion, first of all, has to do with what happens if you have a smaller lot in, let's say, RL5 or RL2. Let's say you have a 1 acre lot. It's been designated as RL5. These designations really has more to do with further subdivision of properties. So if you have a 2 acre parcel here or 5 acre and you don't want to subdivide it anymore, this isn't going to affect you. So it's really more of further restriction of future subdivision of large property. Let's say if you have a 20 acre parcel, you're going from to RL5. Yes, that will definitely affect you, and we'll have to talk about whether is that a good thing or is it just to preserve the character, and that's where we can have that conversation.
So if
yes.
you have if you're in the 20 acre and you have 5 acres, that's going to affect you, you say.
You won't be able to subdivide it further, but if you just want to build a house on a 5 acre parcel, that's still the same. It doesn't affect that in any way.
If you've got 20 acres and 20 acres, then you can't subdivide.
Yes.
But if you have 40 acres and 20, then you can subdivide.
Into 2
Why
parcels.
are you doing that? What is the point of
It's,
having big properties?
Well, a lot of these is pretty hilly actually, so a lot of these, the topography doesn't actually allow you to subdivide currently. The zoning will say, or the land use will say 1/2, but the actual, if you wanted to subdivide at this point, then you look at the topography, the hillside, it'll probably just still come up to 1/20. So it's, first of all, it's a reflection of the current restrictions of that particular property. One other thing we are thinking though is that we wanted to also create what we call a transfer of development rights program, and it's part of the implementation of the plan. So let's say in these areas where they could not build at 1/2 anyway, so we made them RL20, but we could give them incentives where they could sell their development rights. So let's say a developer up in the economic opportunity area near the freeway where they need more density, so they would essentially buy these densities at 1/2 or 1/5. So that way people can still, make economic use of their property. And that would sort of benefit the areas where you said you'll have more open space. And to pay for that open space, you'd have developers, pay for that in areas where we can have further density. So that's, we can take it one, topic at a time. So let's stay first with the land uses before I go to zoning. So do you have a question about land use? Or?
So to maintain the rural character, you're actually downgrading the land use. So like, for example, I live over off of Carson Mesa area, and it's being designated RL2 as opposed to A2 and 5 acres as it stands now.
I think that's a good segue to the zoning then.
So that means that the parcels that are all vacant surrounding me can have 2 properties or 2 houses per the 5 acres, because the lots are 5 acres. So, correct?
Well, no. First of all, to be specific about it, what we're doing is we're proposing to reduce the residential densities in certain areas. So when you go out of town, we are proposing to reduce the number of dwelling units that can be built within those areas. But we are increasing the zoning though. A lot of these areas are zoned A1 right now, or light agriculture. We are increasing it to A2, and primarily because there's not that many people, let's say, living here. And I've heard that dog kennels, dog training is sort of a big thing, and that's one of the big difference from A1 to A2. It could be an animal hospital, riding academy. There's a lot of things that can be done in A2 and not in A1. And I actually have a handout here that sort of compares A1 versus A2. So a lot of these areas here are going from A1 to A2, and primarily because there's not that many people who are living there in really close clusters. We can't afford to have larger, more impactful uses that are allowed in A2, but not in A1. Yes.
Okay, so somebody they live in an A10.
A210?
A2.
Yes, okay.
Well, what you said earlier was, you want to to help people so they can economically be able to sell their properties like to a developer. So they won't lose their,
That's for like a transfer of development rights
but
program.
if you can only build one house on those 10 acres, what is the developer going to do with it?
Got it. I mean that program, and that's an implementation program. That's not, the details of that won't be in the plan yet. So we have there a framework that says we'll do this in the next year or two. But what it would do though, like the RL10s to RL20s, that applies when people actually want to build or subdivide their property. But if they sell their development rights, we can set transfer rates at either 1 per 2 or 1 per 5. So it doesn't have to be 1 per 20. So
I need to say something here, because we're mixing some things up here. The community of Acton wants to keep Acton rural. That means larger pieces of property, not postage stamp pieces of property that you want to sell your 10 acres to a developer to put 50 homes on. That's something the community has said that they don't want. That's what they're trying to work with. When he's talking about density transfers, it's if you have a 20-acre parcel, you can get a incentive from a developer somewhere outside of Acton who wants to build a lot of units on a smaller piece of property by agreeing to keep yours at that 20 acre, and you transfer your development rights. Say yours is zoned N2 or RO2 or whatever the zoning is there, which would allow you to divide it into 2-acre parcels, but you choose not to. You sell those rights to someone in Palmdale who wants to make their 10-acre into all these different properties, and you get money for doing that, but it has nothing to do with the Acton plan. And then your A1 and A2 are land uses, what you can use that land for. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but you can use, for A2, you can have the same uses as A1, but more uses. So it's more of an agricultural kind of thing. But if it is zoned underneath that for 2-acre parcels, then you can divide it into 2-acre parcels, even if it's a A1. Like in the old time was A2 10.
yes, there are some A to 10 in there. There's some A to
And
5.
that's the old terminology. What would the new terminology be?
Well, we do still have areas that will be A2, 5, A2, but in Acton, our proposal actually has A2, 2. But if we received some comments that we want to keep, we want to restrict clustering to, let's say, this area is a 5-acre parcel, then we would go to A2, 5 in that. So there's a couple of different tools that we would work with. The minimum lot size is actually a regulation on clustering. How close can the dwelling units be? So if you have A2, 2 or A2, 1, people can be much closer than if you have A2, 5.
In the past, we've got into trouble in Acton by clustering. They'll cluster, they'll have, like, say, a 100-acre parcel, and the rule is 2 per acre, so they give the okay to build 50 houses. And they put the 50 on little 3/4 acres or less than an acre parcel, leave the others open space, then go in later and say, oh, we got all this open space, we need to divide that. And some planners have not followed the directions they've been given to not divide that, but part of what Carl's doing is identifying those and setting up a land use and zoning for those in such a way they cannot be subdivided.
So the value that you had before, all of a sudden it's not there. Well, then what is a person going to do? Well, then a developer comes along and says, well, I'll buy that. Well, what is a developer going to do with a 20-acre parcel if you can only build 2 houses,
That's
right?
right.
Or 1 house.
Right.
But we all know that the developers can go to the city and they could get it done.
But they will not be able to get it done with the general plan, the area plan, and the CSPs all saying the same thing. That will set the development plans for this area for Acton. And that's what we're trying to get is consistent. If you have a 20-acre parcel that you can now divide into 2 10s, and you want to divide it into 2 10s, send your parcel number to that man right there, and he'll make sure your rights are retained.
I think that's a good point. I think the first level of that would be to see whether does the map reflect the vision of the community for its area. So if we've mapped something RL20 and RL10, and there's a good sense to me that it shouldn't be RL10 or RL20, it should be RL5 or RL2, then we'll definitely take a look at that. And as I've said, we have received comments, and we are making a bit of changes in these areas. So You just need to tell us. You let us know, then we'll take a look at it. It will at least be considered, and it will be considered seriously. And if we can make the changes, we'll definitely do that.
Quick questions. When is the deadline for comments to be made as it pertains to our Acton area and
I would say, I mean, technically changes can be made until the board adopts the plan. But it gets harder the closer it gets to hearing. So I would say if you can get it to me first week of September. The hearing is going to be on September 27th. It's a Saturday morning at 10. It'll be at the AV College Theater. So I would say if you can get comments to me at the latest early September, we'll still be able to analyze that and see. But I would say as soon as possible. And I am here every Wednesday except for next Wednesday. But every Wednesday I'll be up in the AV field office. So please give me a call, set up an appointment, and we'll talk about your specific properties and see what we can do about that.
okay, and then the community standards district, from the map that I saw, it didn't cover all of Acton. It covered the Acton Town Center was what I saw it.
Community Standards District defines what is called Acton, and it goes to Angeles Forest
Okay.
Highway.
It should, yeah.
Past Escondido,
okay. I
into
must
the
have read
forest on both sides.
It's unified.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I
Here.
misread the map. Since
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, this is the map we have online. So this is the CSD.
Okay, very
So
good.
it does cover all of that.
And then between the three, between zoning and the
Land
general
use,
plan
uh-huh.
and the CSDs, worst case scenario, if there isn't consistency all the way through, which one overrides the other?
Well, we need to make it consistent. So the process right now is, this is the foundational document. So this is the 1986 document we are updating. So once we've updated this, we are going to review all the CSDs in that locality. So if there are things that needs to be changed in the Acton CSD, we will work with you again and take a look at those. And hopefully you will do
In
that.
the past, land usage has overridden pretty much everything else. Even though you'll have people say the CSD overrides everything, it doesn't land use.
Yeah.
That's why for the last 7-8 years, we've been meeting on the consistency process to get them all consistent, and that's where.
And they should be consistent.
Right.
There is a government requirement for us to make the general plan, the area plan, and any implementing ordinance such as the CSD consistent with each other. So it may not have been in the past, but that's what we need to do right now. She's been raising his hand right away, so I'm sorry, let me go in then you. Sorry.
Let's say I have a parcel and I decide, I have no use for it, so I'm gonna transfer the development right
Mhm.
somewhere else. And according to your plan, what happens to the taxes?
I mean, that's a good question. I think, yeah, I was asked that last night. The answer is, actually, I'm not sure, and we haven't just worked out the details yet. It may be taken over by, either Conservancy or I actually don't know. And again, if it is an implementation program and we work out the details there, we'll come back and talk to you guys. But right now, what we want to do is to make sure that all of these implementation programs are considered when we map the areas, either RL5, RL10, or RL20. Because when we do that in the future, I mean, it'll come in, 1 year or 2 years or 3 years from now, but it will be based on this. So an RL10 or RL20 can get into that program, but an RL5 or lower won't be able to get into that. So it'll be available only to the RL10 and the RL20 because they have very low density. So it's really a balancing act. It really depends on what the community wants to do, how it wants its community to develop in the next 10, 20, 30 years. All of these are really just tools with, how to manage this growth in the future. And it's really up to you guys to tell us what you want for your area, and not just for the whole of Acton, but for your specific area. And we'll translate that into whatever tools that we would need, for planners to make decisions in 5, 10 years from now, and make sure that gets translated into reality. I mean, everything we're doing right now, it remains a piece of paper unless it's implemented by a planner regional plan. So we want to make it sure that, and this is as clear as possible, that it reflects the community's vision for itself in the next 10, 30 years, and it gets implemented that way. Let me go to him first.
Let's say the proposals, that's online, kind of makes it easy to get hold of it. And the Blanchard General Plan overview pretty much The question I have, and I didn't read probably far enough, it's probably addressed, but you can probably tell us it quickly. How does the county address the declining value of the property real estate based on the rezoning of the land?
Well, I'm not sure what's the basis of you saying that, the zoning itself are being restricted in terms of uses. Because maybe I think in the past there was sort of a proposal to change the M1 zone. I don't know if that's what you're referring to sort of remove the commercial uses.
Yeah.
That's since been shelved. And that was being done by a different section, but we got comments that it doesn't really make sense. So M1's not going to change. The C1, C2, C3 is not going to change. But in the AV and in Acton, we are using a new zone, which is the rural commercial zone. It's actually a bit more than C2. So if you have C2 or C1 right now, you actually get a lot more uses in that area. It's a bit less than C3 because then we're not allowing department stores, for example. So that's like a big box retail. So we are trying to weed out the urban commercial uses. And we are relaxing a lot of the regulations in the rural commercial zone, like in areas where if you wanted to display nursery items for plants and things like that, right now you have to put up a block wall in the C1, C2, C3. So in the rural commercial zone, you don't have to do that. So there's a few exceptions that we're building in. And we're putting in incentives for more flexible parking as well. So if people wanted to park if business owners wanted to provide parking for RVs or dually trucks or utility trucks or in some areas even semi-trucks, it will make it easier for them because it's not just standard and compact. If somebody wanted to put a dually parking or an RV parking, they can do that as well.
So then with regard to the reduction of density of residential properties, various sizes, everyone is concerned, is the only form of compensation to the property owner changing development rights?
Well, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, what we are doing is in some areas we are reducing densities. But I would say that we want to do this where it's appropriate. So, I mean, if you're saying in some areas that we have made it or it's not appropriate.
About the appropriateness of the zoning changes of the reduction of density. I think we're all clear with that. I'm asking about a person goes in and buys a piece of real estate last year, and in 5 years, they find out they cannot cut it up into what their investment was intended for. Or to give to their kids, for instance.
But exactly.
How is that dealt with in the ordinance?
Well, because you're thinking about areas where it makes sense to subdivide. There are areas where it doesn't make sense to subdivide, where it makes sense to have larger lot sizes. And studies have been done. I mean, they've done this in San Diego County where they actually went to RL80, RL100. And the finding is that not only does it not reduce property values, it actually increases property values in areas where it's appropriate to have large lot sizes. So what will happen is then you have consistency in terms of the acreage. Then you don't have one big lot size, then somebody will subdivide to 2 acres, and it's kept vacant. So I think that's what planning is all about. It's finding the highest and best.
Your answer is that it doesn't reduce property value.
It does. It shouldn't. But again, it all depends. It all depends on the specific characteristic of your parcel and location.
Right.
So I think that's where the discussion should be. If you think your parcel has been wrongly designated and you just feel that you should be R5 or to me, just let us know and then we'll try to look at it. And we are making changes. I mean, I'm now compiling all the changes that we are going to make based on comments I've received, and we will take it to the planning commission. So hopefully, I mean, this won't get adopted this way. It should incorporate all the comments received from this point forward.
Right. What's the best way to let you know that it's inappropriate?
Just give me a call and let's meet and talk about your property. There's no magic formula, unfortunately. It's not a hard science. But you would have better idea about what's going on in the parcel. And we won't look at it from a parcel level. We'll look at everybody. So if a group of you feel strongly about that, then I think that puts you in a better position. Yes, we will do that and change. And yeah, we've made a commitment to town council. We will go with what the community wants for Acton. And I think we've made that. I think for the past year we have made it. This has changed quite a bit for the past 2 years. This wasn't like this, have received comments both on land use and zoning. So hopefully, so far, we've been able to address.
So you have a number to call and hours that you should call?
Yeah, I actually have office hours in the AD field office every Wednesday from 10 to 3. But it's getting filled up pretty quick. So I would say give me a call, set up an appointment, and I'll leave a bunch of my cards here. So yeah, I mean, it's hard to talk about specific properties in a big group because then others won't be too interested. But
One of the other quick comments I need to make is that in the Acton CSD, the minimum lot size is 2 acres. That's specified in there. That's what we've been pushing with the county as well, minimum 2 acres. So if you're looking at a property that's right now zoned for 2 acres and you want to drive it down to 10,000 square foot, that's not going to be supported. But if you want a 2 acre, no problem at all. And any lot that exists now that is a quote-unquote legal lot is buildable.
And I mean, that actually drives a good point there. I mean, I said that we are committed to, making this reflect what the community's vision is for itself. But what that vision is, that's a bit harder to, to come at. There are individual differences in opinions and visions, so we just need to talk to you as much as possible. I mean, we're working with the town council. So we just try to arrive at that as best as we can and hopefully reflect that in the plan. Yes.
I'm confused about what you just said about the minimum being 2 acres.
Yes.
I think over in Sterling Ridge, and most of those houses, there's 82 houses there, and most of them are on less than 2 acres.
Sterling Ridge was built a long time ago.
So that's.
Exactly. They have been grandfathered.
The standards went into effect in 1995. Since then, there have been some lots that have been quote-unquote clustered, where there's an open space associated with it, one big lot or something. So it's like an averaging thing, where you'll have maybe 10 1-acre lots and 1 50-acre lot. And those are the ones that we're addressing also that in the past were stipulated not to be divided down any more than that, and those have been identified, and Carl's working on zoning those and land using those appropriately so they can't be further subdivided as they were originally agreed to.
Well, let me go to those who haven't asked a question first, just to be fair.
Okay, Carl, I assume Mike's just talking about forecast homes, which is Desert Road and Mary Road and all of in the north side of Sierra Highway, because there's some very large lots in there. What will you do with those? There's some at the top of the mountain. There's some 100-acre parcels.
Yes, we did get that information from the town. So we didn't know that before, to be honest, and I just learned recently that the county had allowed subdivision in the past, so which it shouldn't have done. So what we want to do here is to sort of help avoid that in the future. So we want to identify those parcels. So far I have these. So this parcel here. So if this is a 4-acre, 5-acre parcel, it's RL2, so technically they could have subdivided, but they have restrictions in their deed that they can't subdivide further because of the subdivision of the whole property. So we are changing that to RL5. So we are flagging those and telling the planner 5, 10 years from now, don't subdivide this any further. So we'll try to address that.
Carl's doing in my opinion, and I've worked with a lot of county planners, he's doing an excellent job of listening to the community, listening to the council, and working with us. Doesn't mean he can't make mistakes, so we have to keep him honest.
That's a good point, and I think the only way, this is an incredibly large area, and we got the only way to get this not perfect, but at least close to that, is to have as many eyeballs looking at it as possible. So we do invite you guys to look at it, and we want to explain to you because we want you to understand this. We don't want your thinking to be based on misconceptions or misinformation. So just let us know, ask us questions, and we'll answer this as much as we can.
Carl, is Susie J on this project with
Yes,
you?
I mean she's my section,
Okay.
she's my supervisor. Yep. Yes.
Except-
Sorry, I'll get back to you.
Okay, some of the zoning, out here, we have a lot of home-based businesses, licensed and unlicensed. And is some of the zoning obviously going to change what we may or may not be able to do in those home-based businesses and having deliveries made and so forth?
It's not going to change that in any way. The plan will not change any of the zoning, like the A1, the A2, it's not going to change any of it because that's sort of a county-wide zone. What we have flexibility with is what to zone individual properties. On A1, we can zone A2, but what an A1 means, we can't change it. What an A2 means, we can't change that. We can just sort of change the mapping.
Right,
If
you
you give a
can't change
chance,
an A1 to an A2 or vice versa, if that's, but you can't, as a property owner, I have to go to the county and ask for that to happen.
Or I think it's one
And
change.
you public hearing and the whole 9 yards.
and if any of you have not read the verbiage of the plan, of the town and country plan, I encourage you to read it. It's very good. It encourages home-based businesses in this area. It establishes a rural town center, a rural, what's the next two?
Town area.
Town area, and preserve, rural town reserve, and what should be and can be allowed in those areas. And we work with Carl to even make some of the language stronger than what exists online right now. But I am impressed with how it's put together. There's still a few things that need to be fine-tuned, but from where we started to where we are now is light years.
Well, let me go to her.
I think she asked the same question as far as, I understand your charts here are more towards density as opposed to land use.
You mean like
Density
zoning?
for building and everything, okay, I understand that. And my question was, then there was still the designation agricultural 1, agricultural 2. This as a secondary stipulation on the properties that are zoned out.
No, they're actually going to be both mapped at the same time. So we have, this is the land use map, so that's the density. This is the zoning map. And this will be adopted at the same time. And this has to be consistent with the land uses.
But you said that is the existing, so that's not even.
Oh, no. This is actually a zone change map. You would see here where the zones are changing. Let's say from here A1 to A2. So here A2 to A2, so it's remain the same. So this is a zone change map. It shows existing zoning and the proposed zoning. So if you look at your area, you'll see what you have right now, let's say A1, and what will be proposed to be, let's say A2. So yes, we are changing the zoning as well. It's not just the...
So they are changing the A1 and the A2.
We are changing...
We were just told that the A1 and A2 designation would not be changed, it would just be the density.
Well, no. The A1 zone itself, or the A2 zone itself will not change. What A2 allows, what A1 allows will not change.
Right.
But what we are changing is a property can go from A1 to A2. So it moves from, let's say, to make it clear, I mean, in this list, if we change it from A1 to A2, it moves from this list to this list. And that basically opens up that property to all these other new uses that's not allowed in A1 right now. Does that make it clear?
Yes.
Or-
Yeah.
Let me go to purpose.
Is there an area you're going to go from A2 to A1? That you're going to actually downgrade? Are there areas on that map?
There's small pockets of it, and they're essentially where it's primarily built up as houses. But I would say 90% is going from A1 to A2. I think like this area here, well, no. Let's see. I mean, there's not that. I can get that information to you, but it's really small pockets. And I have to say, the first draft, though, we actually did have a lot of A2 to A1. But one of the comments we got 2 years ago was that A2 was very important to the community. So not only did they want to retain A2, they wanted to change A1 to A2. So we went the other way and actually changed a lot of A1 to A2. And again, that was because of the...
Does that affect property taxes at all?
It shouldn't. It shouldn't. And I'm not a tax expert, so I would say don't take my word for it. But what I understand, though, is the taxes are based on actual development. So if the zone changes, it doesn't change your taxes unless you start building something new there, and then you have to sell your property or get permits, and then that tax assessors start doing assessment.
So back to the density question, it's going to change, if the density question could change the property tax also, if you're going to go to an R20 or an R5, that's going to take, now, if that already, let's say I got 5 parcels, and now you've zoned that whole area as an R20, do I have to go and conjoin all of those parcels under 1 APN?
No, no. And I mean,
Am I able to develop all 5 of those parcels?
Yes, you can.
Because they're already currently
yes,
divided.
yes. I mean, the main point is any legal parcel at this point will be able to develop one single family residence per unit at that time.
But no future parcels can be divided in that area.
Exactly.
and
It's
they
the
cannot be
subdivision.
outside.
Yes, it's a subdivision of future parcels. Yes.
How does a future road or high-speed rail alignment challenge the size of the lot? So let's say it's R5, and now they've taken an acre of the property, for example. If that person chooses, will they be able to develop then on the remaining 4 if it's a...
Yeah, I mean, if it's a legal lot, and again, if it is a legal lot, you get your 1 dwelling unit. So you're saying that if you have a 5 acre and then, high-speed rail or any road comes in and buys a portion of your property, so then your legal parcel becomes like a 3 or a 2 acre. It's a legal parcel, so then you still get your.
Well, let's say it's a 10, and now you want 2 5s, but you only have 1 5 and 1 3.5.
Oh.
Or you have a road now because of development, so you're dedicating part of your land to a road, so you're going to lose.
That's a good question. I think, I know this is based on gross acreages. I'm not quite sure how the road easements play into that, so I could check that and confirm. But I think the easements will not count. If your lot gets adduced by easements, it will still count towards your gross acreage, as opposed to like a net acreage where you take out all the easements that get placed on the property. But I want to make sure that I'm not 100% sure. All of those gets translated to the density, to the RL10s or RL20s. And then the density, again, has to do with further subdivision. So again, I think bottom line, I think this will trump everything else. Any legal parcel at this point, the plan won't change the ability to have a single family residence on that parcel. And I think the fire, even if it's a fire hazard and we zone it, if we designate as RL10 or RL20, it will still get its 1 dwelling unit, even if it's a 2 acre or 5 acre parcel. So yeah, I mean, bottom line, any legal lot will get its 1 dwelling unit.
Is there a temporary moratorium on a hold right now for people that would like to get in and get their subdivision on paper and submitted prior to this going into effect?
Well, I mean, it's not in effect yet. So so now, between now and its adoption, that window is open. But I know about a moratorium. So we're looking at end of the year, probably there's adoption. So it's getting pretty close. But I mean, I think my first, if you had a takeaway from this, my most important message would be, if you do think your parcel is better off as RL5 and you think there's room to change it, let us know first and we may be able to change it. And then, once we talk and we find out that it's really, we can't do it in our plan, and then, you can sort of think about coming into subdivision before. And there are other existing limitations as well. I mean, this one I heard from Acton, I just don't remember the name, but somebody said that, if you subdivide below 5 acres, it triggers a lot more requirements. I think it was fire hydrants or water. So that's why it was sort of what was keeping the lots here at 5 acre lot sizes. So, I mean, you'll still have to deal with that at this point. So yes, you can, but subject to all the existing regulations.
One other comment, if I may follow up what he's saying. It's very true, less than 5 acres, it triggers all those other things for sidewalks, curbs, gutters, streetlights, and all that. In the past several years, the council has been very successful fighting those, mostly for commercial developments, but even some that are non-commercial developments. And in the new area-wide plan, it strongly discourages those kind of improvements because we are a rural area. And the language that Carl and I went over the other day is basically it shall strongly discourage those developments, sidewalks, streets, curbs and gutters, those kind of things.
Yeah. What's the difference between
A1-2, A2-2,
Okay, well, to make it easier, you have to first think of the base zone. So that last number, -1, -2, that basically tells you the minimum lot size. And for this area, for this area, I will defer to the CSD. So when we do the zoning, we actually look at the CSD, we just reflect whatever the minimum lot size CSD. So a lot of it would be A22, as Mike was saying. So the A1 and A2, that's where the big difference is. It's a light agriculture and a heavy agriculture. And this is where I've sort of described that. You're basically going from this list of uses, which is an A1 zone, to this list of uses, which is an A2 zone.
I just didn't know what the last number stood for.
Got it. Oh, so it's really just a minimum lot size.
Acreage.
Yep, acreage.
Thank you.
Yes.
How does the significant ecological areas that's being expanded affect the land use and the zoning and all of that?
Okay. I mean, it is one of the major underpinnings. So if you notice, a lot of the SEAs, we went with a lower density. So that was sort of one of the main reasons. Like these areas here, they all drain into the Santa Clara River. So there's some ecological concerns there. So it was one of the reasons why we went with a lower density. But aside from that, there is this SEA ordinance. So it doesn't prohibit development, but it will sort of say we have to review that project further in terms of how it impacts the ecological value of that area. So in terms of drainage to the Santa Clara River, it just checks that.
So what hasn't been existing SCA and is becoming an SCA, it's basically going to be more difficult or extremely impossible to do any more development on your land.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's impossible, and I wouldn't say it makes it a lot more difficult. I mean, a lot of this is already pretty constrained. There's a lot of hillside areas, so there's already existing constraints there. It will add additional review though. The new ordinance though has a more nuanced list of uses where a lot of the uses, you won't need a CUP. I mean, I think a lot of the concern is with the CUP. But if you have smaller projects and you site it right, if you avoid, the important ecological areas, you should be able to get off with a site plan or director's review. Not a full CUP. But yes, there will be additional scrutiny.
So how is that consistent with the A2
zone or A1
yeah,
zone?
how is that
I mean,
consistent?
A2 and A1 will tell you what you can do. The SAA basically just flags it and say, we just want to look at this further, and then this brings into play the ordinance to make sure you don't, if there are any sensitive species that happens to be on your property, just make sure you stay away from that. And again, it doesn't mean you can't do it, you just need to sort of design your project more carefully than other parts.
Okay, and on the town and country plan online, every single rural area had, this landmark, thing in the middle of the town center. I don't know what you call it, but and they all look the same. And it was a directional landmark type of thing, and that was in the pictures that they did. This is what your community will look like. This is what we want your community to look like. And like I said, it was the same in every rural town in the Antelope Valley. Why is regional planning going that far to actually project or to implement not only those tower things, but
I actually don't know what you're referring to. Is this like photos from years before or something?
no, it's the town and country projected. This is what Acton is going to look like in the town center.
Is it on our website or?
Yes, it's on your website.
Okay. I mean, I can take it. I mean, I know in the past they did some photo simulations of what could happen. I mean, those aren't prescriptive. They're really just it's sort of like architectural renderings of what would happen. But those do not have any teeth whatsoever.
And how does the rural preserve areas, how does that play into everything? Because once you get outside of, the town center here, which is basically
Town area.
Smith, this little square right here, once you get out of that, and it becomes, the different other designations like rural preserve and that type of thing. How does all that play into the plan?
I mean, it shows it here pretty clearly. So if we define the town area here, so the town preserves becomes the RL10 to RL20. So the rural preserve areas are areas we are proposing to have low densities. But again, it's up to you guys to define your town area. So if you wanted to expand this and make it all of this RL5, then that is something we can do. So I think the main delineation is in the rural preserve, we are going with lower densities and we are encouraging, the preservation of open space and environmental resources. So there are different approaches. I mean, I've heard some people who want to live in a more open space area than a more crowded area. So it's really just different areas.
Are you changing any of the smaller lots like down here in town from an A1 to an R1?
There's an area here, and I think that's a good question. There's an area here, because it's H5, so 5 per acre, so that's very, very dense. It's currently zoned A1. We were proposing to zone RA, not R1, RA, residential agriculture. So it's really residential with some light agricultural uses. The main difference between that and A1 is commercial stables, for example. You can still have your horses as pets, but if you were thinking about, doing a commercial stable or raising hogs, then that should be okay. And what that does is that means your neighbors won't be able to do that as well. So that your neighbors won't be able to raise hogs, and you can, if they do, they can complain and you can tell them you didn't have to do that. So that's what zoning is about. So make sure that your exercise of your property rights doesn't affect your neighbor's property rights as well. So I think that's the whole point of zoning.
So if you have horses now and if it's changing to RA, you can still have horses and
Yes.
it's the same amount of horses.
Yes, and the amount is still 8 per acre,
8 to 8.
or 1 for every 5,000 feet. It's quite a lot. I mean, they need to be your own animals, so you can't start boarding animals. So you can't get people to board your animals and they pay you. So that's A1, but RA, it's a residential zone with accessory animals. I think in balance, I have heard more people say that they want to limit commercial in those areas. So, but that's they want to limit commercial. So I think the two opinions are out there. But again, the tough thing is how do we come up with what is the majority or what the consensus.
Do a survey.
Yeah.
Yes.
To answer your question though, how it affects this is I think when we were doing this, we had already the comment in mind that people wanted the more rural character to that area. So the rural commercial zone, I guess, it's actually a much more rural commercial zone than the C1, C2, and C3. And I think that's a good point. There's 2 new provisions there that would help regulate that. One is for drive-through services, we're going to require CUP. So now, if it's a permitted ride and they just build a drive-through, it's a permitted ride actually. So I think the newest cases you've heard, I think those were permitted rides, so they didn't require CUP. So in this new zone, any drive-through would require CUP. The second thing is, sorry?
How many years?
The CUP you mean?
If you're going to build something, you need to do a certain amount of years.
Exactly. I mean that's up to the discretion. That's part of the public hearing process. And it can go, from 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It is up to how the public hearing process goes. What it actually does is really just brings you guys into the conversation. So nobody can just slip a project in with a drive-through without going through a public hearing. So it does make it tougher for people to put in drive-throughs there, but we are trying to make it easier in certain areas, like more rural feed stores and things like that, more rural usage, you're allowing that a bit more. And the other thing I want to point out is that there's another new provision there that says if any development increases the intensity of the area such that it requires a traffic light, then that would trigger a CUP as well. So basically, it brings the community into the discussion and just, requires public hearing.
But that doesn't mean that the CUP can't be granted by the
Exactly.
county, so.
We can't say no. I mean, we can't foresee any all, all different iterations of possibilities for the next 10, 20, 30 years. So we can't say no completely, but what we can do is to build in processes and checks and balances to make sure that, at least you guys can raise your opinions. And the community can change. I mean, the community opinions can change over time, so we don't want to sort of, strict that at this point and say this is what it is for the next 30 years. So it's really just a balance, and we have to...
Aren't the terms of the CUP being rewritten?
Being what?
Rewritten? They're changing the terms of or how the CUPs are being granted, or something along those lines. I know Jackie there was very concerned about that.
I mean, it's an implementation thing, and in the end,
So it's in the works. And
to be honest, I don't know. I didn't think so. But I guess my basic point is the conditions of a CUP are based on individual circumstances. They do go to public hearings, and in the end, it's up to the hearing officer or the planning commission to grant those. So in the end, if you don't like the terms, you can, raise your voice and say it's not.
At what point would a traffic light be required?
Well, the public works, I'll rely on public works for that. So when, when a commercial use comes in, it's a permitted use as far as the zone is concerned, but it's a very intense use, it brings a lot of traffic. Public works does a traffic study, and if they say, oh, this will require at this level of traffic generation, will require traffic light, and that will trigger a CUP.
We also not have a study?
Is there a designated rural commercial zone right now?
Right now, no. So that will be a new zone that will be created together with this, and that actually was designed primarily for the Antelope Valley. We're not using it anywhere else in the county. So it's really just in the Antelope Valley that we're doing it in. So it's a new zone, and I left a bunch here. It's all done. So if you can, I can send it to the town council. I can send a copy. So it's a draft zone, so it's still open to comment. So if you do want to give any comments on that particular.
So there is a draft zone.
Yes, that's the one.
It's in here?
That's the exact.
Oh, yeah,
zone.
but this is like rules and regulations for the commercial zone.
No.
I don't know where the zone is. Physically.
You mean where it's being mapped?
Yeah.
Oh, that's this one. Here, so like all the red ones are the rural commercial zones. Is that what you were saying? So all these red ones are rural commercial zones. So if you look at here, it says C2 to CRU. It's a CRU zone. So that's the zone. This is the mapping of the zone.
I think you're concerned about, can they build a commercial property close to your residence? I mean, is there a zone, or can it be anywhere?
No, it has to be the rural commercial zone.
It has to be in.
Yeah, it has to be rural commercial. And that's what, I think that's what Mike was saying, the consistency between zoning and the land use. So, an A1, A2 can build a rural commercial zone.
But isn't that zoning opening up Acton to have the high traffic and that type of thing that will eventually allow traffic signals and that type of thing to come in?
No, I think it will actually limit it. Remember, these are currently C1 and C2 zones. And the CRU is a much more, it's permissive in the rural ways, but it's restrictive in the urban way. So if you're thinking about, the traffic generation, the more urban impacts, I think the rural commercial zone actually restricts urban development more than C1 or C2. And that's the main reason.
So what about the story or the rumor that there are already applications for several more fast food chains to go in here up here at Crown Valley and the freeway?
I don't know. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to be bureaucratic about that. So it's a different division that does permits.
So how do we find out? So we can do something about it?
I can find that out for you, and I probably have the town council would know. I'm not sure, but it's with our current planning folks. We can get that information and send it to the town council.
We did talk about the potential Taco Bell development where the current country feed is, and I believe town council is going to be meeting with Starbucks. Is that right, Tammy?
I think the 22nd,
gonna miss our mark.
Come to the meetings. That's why we.
Sorry,
We're all gonna miss our mark. We're all
let me,
gonna miss our mark here if we keep being distracted by what we can do. We know we can do residentially and agricultural. Now, these commercial zones, are they gonna take a survey after the fact that they put these so-called drive-throughs in? Or can we not rescind this and maybe look at it again and try to get maybe, if we want to get restaurants in, why don't we get something that's more appealing to the town? Not drive-throughs, but maybe real restaurants that people don't drive through, up through, that we get traffic on the freeway.
I mean, that's a good point. I guess from our end, I think I would have to give it back to you, but that's really up to you. Right now, what's up there is C1 and C2. The rural commercial zone will give you guys more tools to regulate that. But the rural commercial zone won't take effect until after the year. So now, between now and then, you have the C1 and C2. And what we can do is take a look at those regulations. And C1 and C2 would allow currently restaurants with drive-throughs. The regulations allow that.
But then, at the same point, we know this through you. They also know that, so they're gonna rush their projects through before the zoning comes up.
Again, I think you're right. It's really up to the community, guys. There's only so much we can do.
They're gonna stop a survey, we can voice our.
Exactly. And you have to understand, guys, I mean, I can't take your side. I need to be neutral. I mean, all we can do is to enforce what's currently on the books. And what's currently on the books, these C1 and C2 does allow. And
But they
they'll probably
didn't allow drive-through.
We already have to.
I mean, my point is, it's really up to you guys. To put this into context though, I mean, there's not a lot of things that I personally can do about that. Because what
With the survey though, you can have a majority vote and then you can go from there.
that would help me push this through. And that was I mean, I've gotten some comments that, you know, people wanted more commercial and don't mind drive-through. So if I heard that more, we might, you know, be having second thoughts into going with rural commercial in this area. But with that survey, it'll make it really certain that, yes, we want to leave it commercial. And that would sort of strengthen this position. But until this is adopted, again, it's really up to you guys. It's what's currently under regulation.
Lily, can you have those surveys like whenever issues, you know, if you
Yeah,
have.
here you go. We've got,
Okay, sorry I was outside, but subject to drive-through.
Where are we with Starbucks and Taco Bell?
Now, there's another question on the floor, right here.
Okay.
Let's,
I want to know if you guys can request in this plan a traffic feasibility survey prior to the construction or approval of the plan.
That letter is going into the county already for traffic studies in that area.
But for any area of commercial development.
We can do that as well, that's not a problem.
And that's one thing that the rural commercial will do. So again, and not only does it, you know, ask for that, if it does find out that it will require a traffic light, then it moves it from a permitted use to a discretionary use, which means it becomes a public hearing, and the planning commission has discretion whether to approve it or not. So again, the rural commercial zone, I do think, addresses a lot of these concerns. But again, it's still a proposed zone at this point. So,
And again, in the plan that he's developing, they shall strongly discourage traffic lights as well. So that in there is also language to strongly discourage, what's the transient business, what's the term for that?
visitor serving.
Visitor serving businesses, which would mean coming off the freeway.
These other Starbucks, they're getting in permits now.
So where do we stand with that? Can you stop it? Did the town council let any say?
Okay, let's go, yes, we do. There's strong influence and impact generally on what happens. At the recent town council meeting, there was a vote taken on the country club fee. And in that vote, the council voted in favor of approving their project with a drive-through. Okay,
Against the
with a
people that
drive-through.
read
Let me answer the question here before we start commenting two other projects that we are talking to developers on now that they're either submitted or planning to submit to the county. One is at the corner of Sierra Highway and Crown Valley Road at Taco Bell, which also wants a drive-through. The other is a Starbucks at the corner of Crown Valley Road and Antelope Acres, who also wants who also wants a drive-through. The general consensus is that both of those projects we will oppose a drive-through. You never know what will happen until the vote is taken, but Taco Bell would be extremely problematic with a drive-through on that corner and that level of business. The council has in the past been strongly opposed to the drive-through concept. The individuals that voted for the drive-through or for the plan with Town and Country Feed with the drive-through felt that it was significantly different because it was off of the corner and that there would be less disruption of traffic. I'm just telling you what I heard. Also, I've already talked to Carl about making most of Sierra Highway there by Jack in the Box, the auto parts store, to the corner, a no parking zone. Because you can't pull out on the street without taking your life in your hands. And if there's going to be a drive-through or even without a drive-through, it's extremely dangerous there.
I have a question, and I'm getting off topic of what we're doing here. So with the Country Club Feed project, did anybody at all do a study on where in the dickens those big hay trucks are going to park? How in the world they are going to get in and get out of that parking lot without crushing other cars? Where are those squeezes going to go? Are they going to park on the street and backing out into Sierra Highway? Is the building sitting far enough forward, far enough back? In the original plan, there was additional buildings to cover the hay. The new plan, there's no buildings. Where are they going to store all this stuff? How is the traffic going to be affected right there with not only Country Club Feed, not only a stinking another burger joint, and I'm sorry, it is a stinking burger joint. I don't like the place. I've eaten there once and got food poisoning, etc. You've got Jack in the Box right next to it, another burger joint. You've got McDonald's, but yeah, but you've also got Shell with Subway. You've got the 76 coming out. Hasn't anybody done a traffic survey on what is going to happen? I mean, I've seen it jammed up there with the hay trucks going into country clubs currently. I can't imagine that making
If
that
you
happen.
will, you've asked several questions.
I know.
One of which is traffic patterns for hay trucks. We have been assured that there seems to be adequate room for a truck to go in there, turn around, unload, and come back out.
With that parking lot full
Yes,
of clients.
that is what he has indicated to us. That's what the measurements show.
On 1.3 acres down, you're going to have 4 businesses. Did we not kick Panda to the curb
Okay.
for 3
If I
businesses
can
on
continue
10?
answering, the other thing is they have been requested to do a traffic study for that business. We have also requested the county do traffic studies, and when the individual is identified that I'll clarify it to, I want traffic studies that involve that entire area.
Correct.
And we know the traffic study that was done for Panda, and theirs was way over the board in what they wanted on that property there, but it was several thousands additional trips a day, which is going to be a nightmare there. Absolutely. I don't disagree with you one bit.
I mean, I just know, I've seen hay trucks, you see them coming down the road, you see them turn a corner. I mean, you see them here on Crown Valley, turn into, go down Smith to Fox Feed, and they take up the whole stinking road. That's a double lane highway, and they take up the whole road to get into Fox Feed. I mean, to me, this is a safety concern for our children at school, as well as public safety for us residents, public safety for commuters. This is a huge risk, and I know I'm getting off topic, but I can't believe the town council voted to approve a stupid plan.
All I can say, the council is made up of members who each vote their conscience, and each voted the way they
I
felt.
mean, I'm not against
I am-
development and.
Can we wait while I finish talking, please? Sorry. Each individual council member made the decision based on their input from community members they talked to, based on their beliefs in what was available and what was possible at that section. I cannot second guess why people made the decision other than to lay them at their face. The developer and the plans show and would tend to indicate that a hay truck can go in there and do a circle around it and come out without obstructing traffic, even if cars are parked there. If you have a question and you want to come in with a yardstick or something, I can make sure the plans are made available to them, and you can look at it.
I've already seen the plans.
Understand?
I've seen the plans, and I've looked at it, and
They seem to believe it can.
well,
That's what
but
they
if
said.
you're talking, I mean, if it's one person talking about one person driving, you're talking about several other drivers that come in from out of state in these hay trucks, and you don't know what their driving capabilities necessarily are. And I'm just being blatantly honest. I mean, I go back to, we kicked Panda to the curb because they were putting 4 businesses to 6 businesses on a 2-acre
All I can
property.
say,
And now we've got 3 or 4 more businesses
all I
on
can
less than 2
say
acres.
is the community feels strongly enough, you need to let your feelings be known, not only to the council, but to the county. They heard us, they listened to us at Panda. Hopefully they will on these other projects as well. But we are not in any way, shape, or form encouraging development in the community of that kind that's going to disrupt the community.
So with the approval, doesn't the county look at that approval already that the town council gave and say,
They
now
will
go
look at
ahead?
that, yes. But as I say, the council is made up of 9 members with vote their conscience, majority rules on the council. I can't arbitrarily say I don't agree with somebody and change their vote.
No, I-
They can change their vote. They can move to reconsider the motion. There are many things they can do. Whether they will or not,
Okay.
I don't know. Sandy's got her
Are
hand
we
up.
not getting this gentleman, are we not getting?
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
And it's okay. I mean, it does answer one of the questions I had coming in. I mean, before this, I was sort of wondering where the creed was in terms of commercial uses. I have heard it from both sides, so now it's clear. So,
It'll be really clear when the survey comes in.
I mean, exactly.
Okay, the other thing, someone's tossed the word survey around, and I'll let him get back to his thing. There are many ways to make a survey. There are not that many ways to make an effective survey of Acton.
Something is on A1, grade currently, how would it be rezoned commercial in the commercial area on Sierra Highway?
So you're saying if it's A1, A2 zoning commercial?
Yeah.
I've been asked that question. That's one of the questions I had coming in. And I would say based on this discussion, that's going to be a very, very tough sell.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, we had to consider it because we do get it from individuals. But yeah, I mean, with this discussion, an A1, A2, it'll be a very tough sell to change it to commercial. And this doesn't do that. There's no,
Right.
this changes a lot of existing commercial zones that are vacant are being changed to A1, A2, so it's the other way around.
Oh, really?
Yes. The archery property somewhere, this one here. And so, yeah, and the town council, gave us very, very detailed comments.
Just as clarification, I keep butting in, I'm sorry. You probably enjoyed it when I was outside. But anyway, the archery project was stipulated in the CUP that it would revert to A1 zoning if it was not developed in a certain amount of time. It had not been done, so we have been working with Carl for those kind of situations and those kind of properties to follow what guidelines were given in the first place, to revert those back to the A1 as opposed to commercial, since it was not used as it was approved in the past.
Yes.
Come back to this. There's 2 things I'd like to address. One is Santiago Square and its commercial nature because it has some particular circumstances. And my other question has to do with semantics and the word discouraged.
we are going to zone that CRUDP, or Rural Commercial Development Program, so that basically ensures that the CUP will still need to be in effect. So they still need to follow whatever requirements is in that conditional use permit.
Okay, so that means there will not be an expansion of the kinds of businesses that can be
Yep.
put in at some.
It'll stay the same.
Okay.
We couldn't take it back, but it will stay the same.
And as far as the word discouraged is concerned, I'm reading here in a portion of the plan that says that they strongly discourage the urban infrastructure and all of that. That does not have enough concreteness to make me comfortable. When you say discourage, that means the county's going to stand there and say, well, we discourage this and we don't want you to do this, but you can do it anyway. So how much clout does that really have in the plan to protect the rural nature of the community if all you're saying is we're going to discourage it, but not forbid it?
Got it. Well, there's two levels we need to look at. One is at the code level, the zoning code. That's where you have your legal, legal terms that has the force of law. In the plan, though, that's used when if there's a discretionary permit and there's a discussion and a planning commission has to make a decision. That's when it gets considered into the process. So I mean, discourage. I know it's a bit vague, but that's sort of what the nature is. The area plan and general plan document itself, it's really a guiding document, sort of a descriptive document of what the vision is. But in terms of actual prohibition, I would look at the underlying zones. So whether A1, A2, or the CSD, for example. So again, a lot of these, if it can be addressed, it may be addressed in the CSD, if not the zoning. But yeah, so there are two different levels, and that is often more of a descriptive nature, and that's why we use the term discourage there.
But the CSD may not take precedence necessarily.
I mean, they're two different things. The CSD should be consistent with the area plan. That's why I said once we do this, we will review your CSD and make sure that's consistent with the plan. So there is that opportunity to have a discussion there where if you're looking for stronger language, that's where it should be placed. I can't say that we will place it because I will have to, we'll have to balance everything, but that's where it should be. And we'll have a discussion maybe end of the year or early next year once everything is done.
Well, then the language has been strengthened a little bit in that area already. I don't know if you got the latest version, but we had been concerned. Shall be strongly.
Yeah, we haven't released the latest version, but we have gotten comments from the town council to strengthen it a bit more. But it won't go to that level where it's a legal term that it has the force of law. It's just not the nature of the document.
In the general plan, or the Antelope Valley area plan, under development standards, it indicates that, the different zoning and stuff shall be subject to the following development standards. Is the community standards district also listed within that?
Well, first of all, you're looking at the zone. So that's already a zone. That's a code. And remember, I was talking about two different things. That has the force of law. So that will be enforced by our enforcement force now. And we can take people to court based on that. But in terms of the CSD, they shouldn't, they may sometimes if we don't do our job, but they shouldn't contradict each other.
Can we reference in the Antelope area plan that, can we, reference the community standards?
Yeah.
That, that everything should mesh within?
We can do that. Yeah, that's a good idea. It shows it it's in the map anyway, so it shows where the boundaries are. But I think you're talking about language in the policies that in specific communities we should refer to the CSD. Yes, I think
Just under Acton, you can put, please refer to Acton CSD.
Yes.
So forth.
Yes, I think that's a good idea.
But again, the whole intent is to make everything as consistent and tight as possible. And first step is land use, zoning is next, then the CSD to make sure everything matches. And everything that the council is doing with planning on land use and zoning is based on the CSD, the provisions in there.
Thank you, Carl, for coming,
You're welcome. And thanks for coming. So it does help us quite a bit with what we're doing.
You've been very open to working with people, and we appreciate that.
Thank you. Yes.
You're rezoning as far as the parcels, want to be 5 acre parcels now? Here's my question. I have an acre, quarter, and 2 3/4 acre parcel. House on 2 3/4 acre. I heard somebody was telling me that if I had a structure fire, I'm going to rebuild that house, I'm not going to be able to do it because it's not going to be a 5 acre parcel now.
No, that's not.
I can combine the 2 together?
No. And again, I mean, the bottom line is, even if it was vacant right now, if it's a legal parcel, we can still build a house in the future. So much more if you were just, rebuilding an existing house.
And what about subdividing? I have another 100 acres behind the house.
Oh, I mean, that's a different story. And that's where we probably should talk more about the specific parcel.
Okay, so.
Yes, it will limit subdivisions. I just want to make that clear. It's further subdivision in the future. So yes, definitely, I think you should send me your APN. We can talk individually.
There's more.
Okay. I think it's hard to talk about individual parcels in a big group because it's very specific. I mean, all of this is very specific to your parcel, your locations, characteristics. So it's just the nature of the parcel. So yeah, I mean, definitely, get my car.
I gotta wait for the train to go through to find out.
The zoom in map feature or that map that's in the middle on its website so that
That's
there now are very difficult.
Okay. I mean, I actually can. It's not that hard for me. To be honest, my worry is that every town council might be asking for it. And to be honest, we're really, really inundated with work right now. I can give the PDF copy to you guys if you want to, or the town council. So we can find other ways instead of putting it formally on the website because that's available for everyone. So we can find ways. We can find ways. If you want printouts, I mean, I'll leave this with you, by the way, for the town council. So feel free to look at it. And we'll definitely put maybe a copy at the library so you can take a look at that.
Are you going to be able to, to meet with individuals? Because I foresee you being contacted, by several people in regards to, from this meeting this evening. Are you going to be able to, have time to meet with?
Well, I'll try my best. I guess that's what I can
You have a couple of assistants that work with you as well.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But so I am up here every Wednesday, so I do meet with folks. So it depends. If one day is not enough, we'll try to get another day in.
Carl is very accommodating, and he's also agreed to primarily work with Acton and the other ones, carry that around.
That's good, because they're not as involved as we are.
That's very true.
Speaking of which, I would suggest to the, to the community and members that are here that anything that you would like, that you want to discuss and that type of thing, that you actually put it in writing and there's a written document, because, just spoken, it could never happen.
And send it certified so you have a receipt. You get mail it and they get receipt.
Also, comments were made about the actual things that are happening here within Acton, different development proposals and that kind of thing. And the council needs community input, and in order to do that, we need president, town council meetings, and that type of thing.
Amen.
Yes, and that's how you get your community input, and if there have been this many people here at the time when the town council had voted, it's quite possible that, that the town council wouldn't have, not guaranteed, but they went against, some members.
But again,
not all.
But again,
Not members of the.
if we have a population of 8,000 to 10,000, this represents how many people? I mean, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to know exactly, other than using the standards as a guide, it's very difficult to understand community input other than talking to people you know. And some people talk to one group, some talk to another, you never know. That's where I really, if I can work with the county in some way too, I'd like some viable way of easily surveying the community. Not that everything will be that easy or people respond to everything, but something that pretty much everyone can agree is a valid way, documentable from step 1 to step 10. Anyway.
is the clustering. What I'm concerned about is with, say, a 20-acre piece or a 40-acre piece or whatever, and a developer will come in and say, hey, this is a piece of property. Why can't we brook this down to 2 acres or whatever? So when we got places that were like 20, 40 acres, one house, how are we going to stop some developer coming in and saying, well, we want that zone change?
Okay, well, first of all, in terms of cluster, you're talking about down to 2 acres, right? So, because below 2 acres, you can't do it because of the CSD. But for the 40-acre, 20-acre parcel, it depends on what we've designated for them. If they are RL20, then they can't subdivide at all. But if we have them as RL1 or RL2, then yes, they can subdivide. And I guess that's sort of why we want to know. We don't want to make everything RL5 or RL2. There are areas where we want to limit subdivision where it doesn't make them have a developer come in and subdivide it. So we want to know
figure it out. I just wanted you to make the comment.
Got it. Okay. So that's why, yes, that's exactly why we have RL20 and RL10.
There's one other thing that is a problem that we've had in the past, and that is if you were clustering. And we pretty well, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we pretty well solved that problem with clustering.
I mean, the minimum lot size is the main tool against clustering. So if you set it at 1, you can cluster more because you set it at 5, for example. So you guys have set it at 2, so it's somewhere. So yes. Yes.
Just one more thing.
So,
If and when, whether the restaurants come in or not, or whatever, is the traffic survey still being pending? And whether or not the street light or street lights get approved, whether there's restaurants or not, how does that change the zoning laws if they were to put a light in, whether there's restaurants or not?
well, what I can say is any complete application that comes in before this is adopted gets analyzed under the existing plan, existing zone. So, I mean, everything I said about restrictions here, about the street lights, yes, they won't be subject to that. So if, I mean, I can't speak for Public Works or even the current planning division, but right now, I don't think there's any hard restriction about not having a traffic light here.
It basically, again, in the standards is strongly discouraged. We've so far been able to avoid having them and avoid the street lights, curbs, and gutters. Public Works has worked relatively well with us unless there's some quote-unquote safety issue that's overriding. Anyone that submits a plan, let's say Taco Bell submitted theirs last Tuesday, they won't be approved for 6 months, 2 years, 3 years. You know, they ain't gonna be approved until this is in effect. And your council's input is going to be, granted, there's what's in place now, but personally, I don't care. This is where we're going. That's what we're gonna judge everything on.
Yeah.
Not anything that may exist to cluster or do anything else. We're gonna basically push as hard as we can on where we are going on the new area plan.
And again, I think that's the importance of community involvement. I mean, I think speaking from the county does listen more to town councils. They have an organized group, and if it's clear that the town council has the community support, then it just gives them more leverage with the county. So the county does listen quite a bit to what the community thinks. So yeah, when this comes into play, then hopefully that gives us more teeth. The official name of the document is the Antelope Valley Area Plan. It has always been that. Town and Country was sort of the name of what we were putting on the project. Similar to if you've heard about the Santa Clarita area, the Santa Clarita Valley Area Plan, it was called One Valley, One Vision, sort of like a catchphrase for that project. So here, our catchphrase is Town and Country, because the model is that you have a town that you want to preserve, and then the countryside is where you want to have lower density. But the official name is and has always been Antelope that's what's going to be adopted by the board.
Okay, the reason why you can harping on that is because we want all three plans to say the same thing, so that we cannot get to that door. And we have had that problem in the past, and this is where we've had a lot of problems. So this is part of why I question.
Got it. Okay, and we'll make sure, I mean, that's how it's supposed to be. It may not be the nomenclature. Okay, it's not
So, as I understand it, well, my daughter's name is Christina. She goes by Mina. So the Antelope Valley area plan goes by Town and Country.
Among those who are familiar with
Right.
it, yes.
Only those good friends.
Exactly, but I was talking to a government agency, I was in the area.
Good.
So,
I think his point was is that it's very important that we don't want to lose the language or the heritage of where it is. And I think that's what Mr. Plum was getting at, is that if we change that language, we'll not forget where we want to preserve, where we want to go to, but also not totally radically change.
but I mean, just to show you, this is the cover of the plan. So we have, Antelope Valley area plan, it has Town and Country here, sort of its catchphrase. The same thing we did with Santa Fe Valley. So, Santa Fe Valley area plan, one valley, one vision. So we'll make sure that that's there as well. I think it's still the same. We still refer to it as Town and Country. Again, if we're in this cross, we call it Town and Country. So it's just it's a term of endearment, I guess, for the project.
Our plan was sent to the
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, but it's an area plan. It's the same planning document. They're different plans, definitely, but I mean, the structure or process is basically the same. It would go in different directions, though.
And just so you know, to confuse you a little bit more, you've got the area plans, Antelope Valley or the Santa Fe area plans, then you have Los Angeles County General Plan, which we are also working with Carl to make sure the language in there is consistent with what we've got in the area plan, the CSP, and the whole bit. So
That's a lot of work.
it's
Oh yeah, I have to give credit to your town council. I mean, I've worked with a lot of communities and not all of them are as involved and as organized as that. And it benefits the community to have an organized town council.
And one that's very as talented as ours.